Ambassador Young, it's such a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for doing this. I've had the pleasure of meeting you a few times, once in my home church in New Rochelle. It's always an amazing time to spend some time with you. And we have an important topic tonight that I want to discuss with you. It's the topic of the racial wealth gap. But before I get there, I have to start out with a hearty thank you. When I think about your life's work, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, U.S. Congressman, ambassador to the UN, first African American, I can truly say I would not be sitting in this seat right now if it wasn't for you. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for your life's work. I'm so fortunate to be here with you. Throughout your
Very
life,
good.
and one of
I
I
just
was
said thank you.
thank you. Thank you for being here. And throughout your life, you have consistently talked about economic equality, and economic equality being the pathway to racial equality. I've heard you talking about, you were one of the first leaders I've heard talk about economics in our communities. How would you characterize where we stand today as it relates to economic equality in this country?
Oh, we're in a very bad hole, but we've been climbing, and I don't. I don't really like statistics. uh, that well, we used to say there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And I was born in New Orleans, in a very, very poor neighborhood. But I never thought of it as poor. Um, and so I never thought of myself as being poor. And I guess I have refused to think of myself as handicapped in any way. I mean, race was not a burden for me. And mainly because I grew up in a really mixed up neighborhood. Irish grocery store on one corner, Italian bar on another. The Nazi party was on the third corner. And I was walking by there daily with people hailing Hitler. I was born in 1932, so it was 1936 when my father took me to the movies, segregated movie, to see Jesse Owens. And he used Jesse Owens in the 36 Berlin Olympics, who won the 100-meter dash. And rather than give him his medal, Hitler walked out as an insult. My father said, but you see, Jesse didn't let that upset him. He said he said, white supremacy, these are white supremacists. White supremacy is a sickness. And you don't really get mad with sick people. And you don't let sick people get you upset, or you're in danger of catching their sickness. And his mantra was when you get angry or upset, the blood rushes from your head to your fist to your feet. And you're liable to do something stupid. He was 5'4", and he said, look, you're never going to be more than 5, 6, or 7. So you won't be able to beat anybody or bully anybody. And you just as well stay calm and use your head. And he'd say, don't get mad, get smart. And you can outthink anybody if you're in a crisis and you stay calm. And that was really, I could not have had any better lesson. I tried to pass it on to my children. It worked sometimes, but with difficulty because I was in a black minority situation. There were no other black kids in the neighborhood. But my parents were the only ones who'd been to college. And so I never felt in any way handicapped. And the same thing when I went to an all black public school where I was, the youngest and the smallest in every class all the way through. And in order to keep up, I had to use my head. And I've tried to, deal with, we dealt with people in the movement that way, that the ones who got in trouble, the ones who got beat up less, were the ones who stayed calm. And even in a mob, even with police officers, I learned that they're nervous about you. So I'd always look at the police officer's name and I'd address him as Officer so-and-so or Sergeant so-and-so. And that's not a lot of respect. That's just a little recognition of the personhood as more important than the differences. And so I wasn't intimidated by his blue suit and his gun and his pistol, and his blackjack. I saw him as a person. And that worked all across Mississippi, Alabama, down in my St. Augustine, Florida, and even to a lesser extent in Chicago.
Yeah, interesting. Let me take you to Atlanta, mayor of Atlanta, and you wrote a great book, which is The Making of Modern Atlanta. So many things went right for you economically during your tenure as mayor. In fact, you really ignited the city to become what it is today. Did you expect at that time for a lot of what you did in Atlanta to be replicated and for that economic success to be duplicated more readily? And where do you think we are today versus what you were able to do there?
I'm still trying. And one of the things that happened, and first of all, having been in the civil rights movement, but going to Congress, and in Congress, I didn't have the advantages that you had of Harvard and Wharton, but I sat on the banking committee. And I was, I was never shy about asking questions because I realized that all the other congressmen knew less than me. And I wasn't afraid to ask questions and challenge people to think about things in other ways. Then going to the United Nations, where I got to know the world, by no virtue of my own. My life has taken me to about 140 countries. And so I didn't read about the German business explosion. I saw it. And so when I got to be mayor, I knew that I'd been on a committee in Congress that was a partnership between the Japanese Diet and the US Congress. And I knew that Japan and Germany had money that they needed to invest abroad. And so when I became mayor of Atlanta, something I didn't want to do, But the only way we could get money was not, there was no money in the government. You couldn't raise taxes. But I realized there was money in Japan that was looking for a safe place to invest. There was money in Germany that wasn't looking, but they needed it. Their businesses were outgrowing the European economy. And so, because Coca-Cola was everywhere, I could decide I wanted to go somewhere, and somebody from Coca-Cola could set up an appointment, and I'd just go and invite them to come and do business in Atlanta. And I said, look, if you're going to be in business in this 21st century, you've got to be in the U.S. market. I don't care who you are, where you are. And the best place to serve the U.S. market is Atlanta, Georgia, because we can get you to 80% of the U.S. market in 2 hours throughout one of the world's biggest and best airports. And we can guarantee you that your money will be safe, that we are honest. You don't have to pay anybody under the table. And to protect against that, I said, look, if you're coming into Atlanta and I'm the mayor, I gave everybody, every major investor had my home phone number. But I did that in front of the staff person that was assigned to them. So there didn't need to be any backdoor transactions. And then I said, we'll be efficient. And so if your money is safe, honest, and efficient, you're guaranteed in the U.S. market to be profitable. And it works. We brought in, I think, about $70 billion in foreign direct investment in the 8 years I was mayor, and 1,100 companies from all over the world moved into the metropolitan area. And the one thing we insisted on, and with every new investor, I met with them personally. And I gave them a list of certified minority contractors, subcontractors, that I said, the only request we have is that you do business with all of our citizens, that you be more successful if your companies look like our citizens.
Right.
And our citizens are half black and brown.
It's great. And I mean, you've been such an entrepreneur over the course of your career. It's always been noticeable how you've always connected also with the young entrepreneurial group. Even when I worked with Sean Combs, I know you had reached out to him a few times, and you stayed connected, especially young African-American entrepreneurs. And currently, I know you're involved with an incredible venture with Killer Mike and Ryan Glover, the Greenwood Bank. And I know prior to that, you were involved with Bounce TV with Ryan, which was a tremendous venture. Tell me a little bit about Greenwood and why you think it's an important venture for you.
Well, let me say that I don't deserve all the credit I get. Killer Mike, for instance, was he was the chairman of the Mayor's Youth Council when I was mayor, and he was 15. Wow. And he was a gutsy kid then. See, and all of these, and really, it's my son more than me that's been in Bounce and Greenwood, and he just did not ever like to be the mayor's son. He said, anytime there's any publicity about me, somebody's off. Well, we had a terrible situation where Maynard Jackson, Julian Bond, and me all had sons about the same age. And one of them was always doing something, rebelling against their fathers, but all of them would get blamed. So he grew up totally averse to publicity.
Yes.
And so he says, I'm more effective working behind the scenes. And I don't like people in my business, and I can do more business by myself or with, and if there are others who like to talk to the press, then he said, let them. But they came up with these ideas that made a lot of sense. And well, entrepreneurship must skip a generation or two, because for some reason, and I don't know how, my grandfather in Louisiana back before in 1910 was organizing burial societies and the Prince Hall Masons and the Knights of the Pythians, all of these Masonic orders and things like that. And he was sort of like a country money manager. Now, my father ended up being a dentist, and he wasn't interested in business. And I ended up a preacher. And the one thing about being a successful politician is you cannot make money. And you can't cut corners. My daddy told me, and I must have been about 10. He said, you see this soap? He said, it's 99 and 44 100% pure. He said, that's pretty good, pretty clean. He said, that's not good enough for you. He said, this is Irish soap. It's white, you black. You can't cut a corner and get away with it. See, not even 44%, 100%.
Right.
And he said, they're always going to be looking for you. He said, it's not just racism. He said, people don't like politicians. They think all politicians steal. They think black folks steal. So what are they going to think of a black politician? The FBI is just looking, they're not even raising the question. They're looking, how is he going to steal?
Right.
He said, so if you're going to be in politics, you just as well decide that you're going to be poor. See, and so my children always resented that, and particularly wanted to go out on their own and do their own things, and I always encouraged it. And so Greenwood and Bounce TV were ideas that came from the younger generation. All I do is I sit on an advisory board and I ask the tough questions and make sure that everything is going in the right direction. I also, every now and then, will find a friend that knows something about or has some connection with the businesses that somebody's in. And I've never hesitated to help any young African American in business. And I'd say, if you're having trouble, I don't have any money, but I have a good reputation and I can talk to almost anybody you need to talk to. See, and so if you need my help, just come on in to City Hall and ask. Or my house was sort of a hangout with, 3 girls and a boy. And then the foreign students that I had met in my travels around the world that were coming to Atlanta to school. I mean, we could have, for Thanksgiving dinner, we could have 50 people. Just y'all come.
Sounds familiar for
Uh,
sure.
and I'd run into these people all over the world, and I'd know their parents. Um, and I've had a blessed life, so I don't take any credit for it. I don't deserve credit, except to know that I'm being blessed, and
Wow.
that my grandmama told me, "You blessed, son," and but the blessings ain't for you. You got to
Right.
pass on those blessings.
Yes. And when you think about something like, and you've throughout your lifetime, I know you've seen many different versions of Black-owned banks, community banks, so on. And obviously, this one is named Greenwood, which has special meaning as it relates to Greenwood, Tulsa. Where do you think banking and having banking owned by African Americans and community banking, where do you think that fits in the equation of really helping to build wealth and turning the dollar over in communities?
Well, I think that they're talking about something, uh, well, digital,
Yes.
something technical. They're talking about a bank without a building. They're talking about a bank that operates on, uh, well, there's one of the young men who's a partner in the deal, got his PhD in cybersecurity at Georgia Tech after he spent a couple of years at Morehouse. And he's got patents on all kinds of cybersecurity uh, phenomena. And he's already using those patented technologies of his in the existing banking world. And this is so new.
Yes.
Georgia Tech just opened a new department of cybersecurity. And I don't understand it, but if somebody's trying to use my cell phone password to buy something, um, well, the last time it happened, it was down in Louisiana.
Right.
And I got a notice on my phone saying somebody's trying to use your password. Do you approve, yes or no? Well, that's a whole new world.
Yes.
And I don't know, I really don't know what I'm talking about, but when somebody in the service station in my neighborhood, there's a sign up there, a Bitcoin lottery. And I mean, if they're going to have Bitcoin lotteries, something that's a new world. There's a blockchain. I mean, there are all kinds of new concepts, and I was listening to the financial services on the radio, on television the other morning, and the whole banking community is right now uh, trying to decide. And I know just enough about economics to believe that somewhere in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have to get the world together as we did in 1944 at Bretton Woods after the Second World War. Roosevelt and Truman had laid out laid out a plan just to get the world together up in New Hampshire, and they worked out certain agreements about how the economy, the new global economy, would work after World War II. Now, the only reason I know about it is I was in the banking committee in 1973 when they ended it.
Hmm.
And nobody knew why they ended it, the agreements. And they started talking about the dollar floating. And I asked Arthur Burns, well, if the dollar is just floating, aren't people going to take advantage of your currency? And he puffed on his pipe and said, young man, the dollar, you'll soon learn that the dollar does not need you to defend it. Say, well, I would shut up, colored boy. You don't know it. You're asking questions. And the truth of it is, reading later on, I realized that he and Paul Volcker and George Shultz had not even discussed why they were coming to the banking committee. And so that got me interested. When smart white folks are making big decisions and are not really sure why and can't answer my ignorant questions, then it awakens, you know, my suspicions and curiosity. So that's sort of, I mean, I've gotten my education in the streets and in the halls of Congress, but also in the practice of, you know, trying to run a city or figure out what's happening at the World Bank at any particular time.
Right, right. So, you know, the audience for this No City Limits conference is made up of government personnel, nonprofit leaders, philanthropists, the financial community, academia, faith community, business people. You coined a term in your book about Atlanta called public purpose capitalism. When you think about all of those groups working together, talk to me a little bit about what you think the opportunity is and that whole concept of public purpose capitalism, how it can play a role in moving in helping us move forward.
Well, you know, back then, when I was talking about that out as mayor in 1980s, I also read a book, The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. Fellow from University of Michigan, and he was saying that when they were trying to sell soap in India, Tide, it didn't go anywhere because they were trying to sell the giant economy size that they made for the U.S. When they marketed the same amount of soap in the 1 rupee package, they sold twice as much as they could have sold in the United States. And that was the kind of example of realizing that the economy has to grow from the bottom up. One of the best things to come out of this this period we're in now is the concept of essential workers. That we have realized that a city cannot function. And it's not only important to have good hospitals, it's important to have good sanitation and clean streets. And viruses crop up everywhere in the atmosphere. And so it's more democratic. You used to think that there was only enough money for a few people. The truth of it is that the more people you bring into the pie, the bigger you make the pie, and everybody's better off. I think Citigroup had a study that said that the U.S. lost $16.5 trillion just since 2000 to 2020, just by being discriminatory. that
Right.
if they treated everybody fairly, they would have been $16.5 trillion richer. When you see rich people understanding that it takes poor people to make more money, when you look at, and I could see this when I was mayor, I could see, I could see Walmart coming up, and I have been to the little store where Sam Walton started that, and the idea that that little country store can become the largest corporation in the world says that the fortune is at the bottom. So anybody that wants to make money, instead of just playing some kind of roulette with the other rich, invest in the bottom and bring everybody up. Now,
Yes.
that's what Atlanta did by Maynard Jackson just said 25% of every contract the city does has to be done by a minority or female-owned company. And it's not just 25% of the work, but 25% of every contract. See? And so that opened up the economy, and people didn't like it at first. But I convinced them when I came along, I said, I raised it to 40%. See? And I said, look how the economy has grown. See? And do you want 25% of 10 billion? Or do you want 40%? I mean, 60% of 25 billion. And there's more money in integrating the money than in hoarding it.
Yes.
And
I got one last question for you. Sorry, Ambassador Young. One last question. That's a great, investing in the bottom. I just love, I love that framing. Your lifelong work has been so important, and you've kind of fought the good fight. And my question is, in 2021, what gives you hope?
well, I think I've never seen more people of any color as awake and alert as they are now.
Right.
That the combination of George Floyd's death did the same thing. I don't know whether you remember a picture on the front of Life magazine of a little nude girl walking down a road in Vietnam. And people saw that all over the world, and they said, I don't want to be a part of a world like that.
Right.
And that picture helped to wipe out the war in Vietnam. George Floyd, we watched him die for 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Yeah.
And I mean, I wanted to jump through the screen to push the policeman off him.
Right.
And I probably would have gotten myself killed if I'd been around there, because I would not have stood by. And it's, but the world woke up, and they called it Black Lives Matter, but which is true for that situation. But what the world's answer was, all lives matter. Mm-hmm. And we've neglected the fact that Black lives have not been appreciated enough. And we need to modify the society. So the athletes woke up. The bankers woke up. The world is more sensitive and alert to both needs, problems, and opportunities than ever. And I'll be 89 next month. See, about 3 weeks. Wow. And things are better than they've ever been at every level. And when young people say we still have segregation, yeah, we still have sin.
Right.
And Jesus died 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. Wow. Well, 89. I hope I can present myself the way you do if I ever reach that number. And that's 89 years of incredible work that you've put in to help all of us. And just appreciate your time and appreciate all that you've done. And look forward to what's to come with Greenwood and everything else you're working on.